killed by a lie. Every origin story needs a spark, and this one starts with something almost embarrassingly small, a fear of needles. According to Elizabeth Holmes' own retelling over the years, in interviews and later in court, she hated blood draws. She was 19, a sophomore at Stanford studying chemical engineering, and she got fixated on a question. What if you didn't need a needle at all? What if you could run hundreds of medical tests off a single drop of blood pricked from a finger? No vials, no labs, no waiting days for lab results to come back. It's a genuinely great idea. The kind of idea that, if it worked, changes medicine for everyone, from cancer screening to diabetes management to catching diseases before symptoms even show up. The problem, which would take over a decade to fully surface, is that nobody, not Holmes, not her engineers, not the scientists she hired and fired, could actually make it work at the scale she was promising. Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford in 2003 to build this thing full-time, and in the process she built herself into a character as much as she built a company. The Black Turtlenecks, styled deliberately after Steve Jobs, the deep, commanding voice, which multiple former colleagues and journalists have publicly noted, sounded noticeably different in private, unguarded moments, something she never addressed directly in public. The unblinking eye contact she was known for in meetings, described repeatedly by people who pitched to her or worked under her. None of that is speculation. It's documented across years of profiles, depositions, and interviews. She didn't sleep much by her own account. She drank green juice obsessively. She quoted Silicon Valley mantras about changing the world with total sincerity, and people believed her because she believed herself, or at least performed belief better than almost anyone in that industry ever had. She raised money from people who absolutely should have known better, built herself into the youngest self-made female billionaire in the country on paper, and never once, publicly, let the mask slip. Whether the technology behind the mask was real is a completely different question. By the mid-2010s, Theranos was valued at $9 billion, on the strength of a story more than a spreadsheet. The board read like a Washington who's who: former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of Defense William Perry, a retired Marine Corps general, sitting senators. Impressive names, incredible for opening doors and lending gravitas to fundraising decks. But here's the part that should have set off alarms years earlier. Almost none of them had a biotech, lab science, or clinical background. You had a room full of people qualified to negotiate treaties and command troops, and basically nobody in that room qualified to ask, wait, does the machine actually work? Walgreens, eager not to get left behind, signed a deal to put Theranos testing centers inside its stores, eventually opening dozens of them across Arizona. Holmes appeared on magazine covers, was compared directly to Steve Jobs, and was praised as the future of healthcare by people who, again, had never independently verified the core claim. The company said its device, nicknamed the Edison, could run over 200 tests from a few drops of blood. Money poured in from venture capital, from private investors, from partnerships. Nobody outside the company had run their own tests to confirm the Edison actually did what the pitch deck said. That detail turned out to matter quite a lot. In October 2015, journalist John Carreyrou published an investigation in the Wall Street Journal, based on interviews with former Theranos employees who had grown uneasy enough to talk on the record. The reporting alleged the company was running the vast majority of its patient blood tests not on its own Edison devices, but on modified, and in some cases entirely standard, commercial machines bought from other manufacturers, all while marketing the Edison as the proprietary breakthrough behind it. It also raised serious, specific questions about the accuracy of results patients were actually receiving, results people were using to make real medical decisions. This wasn't an anonymous internet rumor. It was sourced on the record in parts, cross-checked, and it triggered regulatory scrutiny almost immediately. Theranos' response was aggressive. The company denied wrongdoing publicly and, according to reporting at the time, threatened legal action against the journal and pressured former employees who had spoken up. That kind of response, going after the people raising concerns instead of addressing the concerns, tends to age badly. It did here. The story didn't go away. It got worse. The federal agency that oversees clinical labs, CMS, sent inspectors into Theranos' facilities and found deficiencies serious enough in their assessment to pose immediate danger to patient health. In 2016, CMS revoked Theranos' license to operate its California lab and banned Elizabeth Holmes from owning or operating any clinical lab for 2 years. Think about how bad that has to be. This is a regulator not just finding a company, but telling its founder she's not allowed near a lab at all. Walgreens terminated its partnership shortly after. Investors and patients began filing lawsuits, some alleging they'd been given inaccurate results for conditions that mattered, others alleging they'd been misled about what they were investing in. Theranos' valuation, once $9 billion, was written down to essentially nothing by 2016 in Forbes' own reassessment of Holmes' net worth. The company shrank from around 800 employees to a small fraction of that within about a year. Every pillar the story had been built on, the technology, the retail partnership, the credibility of the board, was collapsing at the exact same time, like scaffolding pulled out from every side at once. In 2018, the SEC formally charged Holmes and former Theranos president Ramesh Sunny Balwani with massive fraud, alleging they had raised more than $700 million from investors through false and exaggerated claims about the technology's actual capabilities and finances. Holmes settled with the SEC without admitting or denying the specific findings, paid a fine, and was barred from serving as an officer or director of any public company for 10 years. That was the civil side. Then came the criminal case, which took years to reach trial. In January 2022, a federal jury convicted Holmes on 4 counts of fraud against investors. Balwani was convicted separately later that year on 12 counts. These are not allegations anymore, they're jury verdicts, arrived at after full trials with defense arguments heard and rejected. Holmes was sentenced to just over 11 years in prison. Balwani received a sentence of nearly 13 years. By the time any of this reached a courtroom, the company itself had already ceased to exist. Theranos didn't go through some slow, quiet Chapter 11 restructuring where you check back in a year, and it's still limping along under new ownership. It just stopped. In September 2018, the company formally dissolved, sold off whatever lab equipment and assets it had left, and laid off its final remaining employees. There was no buyer writing in to rescue it, no reorganization plan filed in bankruptcy court, because there was, underneath all the branding and the turtlenecks and the magazine covers, no functioning product left to save. The company had burned through roughly $700 million of investor money over its lifetime. A company once valued higher than most airlines ended its life distributing leftover lab equipment to whoever would take it off their hands. Elizabeth Holmes is currently serving her federal prison sentence. Sunny Balwani is serving his. Investors, including some very sophisticated ones, hedge funds, media moguls, people who absolutely had the resources to demand independent proof before writing 9-figure checks, lost hundreds of millions of dollars combined. And real patients, ordinary people who walked into a Walgreens for a routine blood test, received results from a system regulators found wasn't reliable. In most industries, that's a business risk. In medicine, it's a human one. The lesson here isn't really about Silicon Valley hustle culture or turtlenecks or charisma, tempting as it is to make it about the aesthetics. It's that fake it till you make it works fine for a food truck or an app that's a little buggy on launch day. It does not work for a machine deciding whether your blood test says you're healthy. At some point, the drop of blood either works or it doesn't. And no amount of confidence, no boardroom full of impressive names, no Black Turtleneck changes the chemistry. So tell me in the comments, where's the line between bold vision and outright fraud? And do you think Theranos crossed it on day one or somewhere along the way? Subscribe. We post a new bankruptcy story every day. Which company's collapse do you want to see next? Write it in the comments.